When we talk about Aries, most people think of energy, drive, and maybe a little aggression. They picture someone loud, impulsive, always starting fights or chasing after adrenaline. But when you strip away the clichés, when you get past the surface of the Zodiac's so-called warrior, there's a lot more going on. Being an Aries Sun isn't about being angry or bossy. It's about being born under a fire that doesn't wait for permission to burn. It's about existing with a pulse that demands motion, identity, and risk. And beneath that fire, there's often something much more tender and raw, something that's rarely acknowledged when we're stuck talking about Aries as if they're the hotheads or attention seekers. And that's what we're here to explore today, what it really means to be an Aries Sun beyond the stereotypes. Every Aries Sun is born with a certain restlessness in their bones, not just the kind that makes them pace or jump into action, although that's part of it as well, but a spiritual kind of restlessness, a sense that they have to do something, be something, define something. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, which often gets interpreted as a sort of eternal child, but that description does more harm than good. Aries isn't immature. It's unfiltered. It's direct. It's not interested in pretending to be wiser than it is just to make others comfortable. Aries knows what it feels and says it. Aries knows what it wants and goes for it. And that kind of clarity terrifies people who've spent their entire lives second-guessing themselves. That's why so many Aries get labeled as selfish, when in fact they're just unwilling to betray their instincts. And that's something that deserves more respect, because what we call impulsiveness in Aries is often a refusal to be paralyzed by doubt. The Aries Sun person is usually someone who has had to figure out early in life that if they don't act, no one will act for them. That if they don't go after what they want, the world just won't hand it over. There is often a deep memory, which is sometimes unconscious, of being left alone to figure things out, of learning, sometimes harshly, that vulnerability won't protect them. So they build courage. They build a persona that charges forward, even when they're unsure. And the irony is that Aries Suns are often more vulnerable than they appear. They feel things quickly and intensely. They hurt fast and hard, but they've been taught not to show it, or they've learned that showing it only invites control, so they armor up. Now, this armor can look like sarcasm, anger, or detachment. It can look like dominance, but it's almost always protecting something innocent, something that still believes in freedom, in possibility, in the idea that life can be good if you just dare enough. Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars is raw drive, not calculated ambition, not careful planning. It's drive, it's will. That's why Aries Suns don't like waiting for the perfect moment. They move before they're ready because they understand that perfection is a lie, that life doesn't wait, and if they don't act, they'll drown in hesitation. So for them, movement is survival. But this can also create conflict, because in a world that rewards strategy and polish, the Aries Sun can feel out of place. Like too much, like too fast, like too reactive. They might be told to calm down, to think things through, to slow down their speech, their feelings, and their hunger. And depending on how they were raised, this can either sharpen them into confident leaders or make them feel like they're always failing at being acceptable. That's the double bind of Aries. On the outside, they may seem like they are the ones leading the charge, setting the trends, and starting the fights, but internally, they're often fighting a quiet battle for self-worth. Because even though Aries energy looks bold, it's not born from confidence. It's born from the need to prove, to survive, and to matter. And because Aries is associated with beginnings, they're constantly drawn to new experiences, new projects, and new people. This can be misread as flakiness or immaturity, but in reality, it's often about a fear of stagnation. Aries Suns feel emotionally threatened by routine. They're not trying to escape responsibility, they're trying to stay alive creatively and energetically. They want to feel their life. They want to burn. And when that flame is dimmed by a job they hate, a relationship that boxes them in, a life that doesn't challenge them, they can become destructive. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they've lost access to themselves. They feel trapped. And Aries does not handle emotional captivity well. What often gets overlooked is just how emotionally idealistic Aries Suns are. They don't end relationships half-heartedly. When they care fully. They care passionately. They want to protect, to defend, and to build. They want love that feels like fire, not in the chaotic sense, but in a sense of warmth, loyalty, and devotion. But that same intensity can also cause problems, because if an Aries Sun feels betrayed, disrespected, or emotionally manipulated, the reaction can be explosive, not because they're angry, but because that anger is rooted in disappointment. They expected honesty, they expected passion, and when they don't get it, they feel like fools for believing. This is something very few people talk about, how much Aries hates feeling foolish. They want to be respected more than anything. They don't want to be feared. They don't want to be obeyed. They want to be respected. And when that doesn't happen, when they feel unseen or dismissed, they either withdraw completely or come back swinging. And that's why emotional maturity is so important for the Aries Sun, because if they don't learn to channel that energy, to metabolize that fire, they can burn themselves out chasing after things or people that never truly see them. But when they do mature, when they find balance, Aries Suns are some of the most inspiring, powerful, and fiercely honest people you'll ever meet. They don't pretend, they don't manipulate, they lead by example. And their energy can electrify a room. They make you feel brave just by being around them, because their courage is contagious, not because they have no fear, but because they act anyway. And in a world full of masks and delays and self-censorship, that kind of authenticity is rare and deeply necessary. Aries Suns also tend to attract challenges that force them to grow. Life doesn't usually hand them things, and that's by design, because Aries learns best by doing, by facing the fight, by failing and getting up again. They have to earn their power, and they usually do, but the journey can be brutal, especially if they haven't developed patience. Aries energy can be explosive, but it needs containment to become strength. And that is the difference between a wildfire and a controlled burn. One destroys everything, while the other clears the way for the new growth. And that's why the most evolved Aries Suns are often the ones who've been through some kind of emotional crisis, a breakup that shattered them, a failure that humbled them, a period of deep confusion when they had to confront their own impulsivity or ego. These are the moments that force Aries to slow down, not by choice, but by necessity. And it's in that slowness that they learn something sacred, that power doesn't come from force. It comes from alignment, from knowing who you are and living it without apology, but also without needing to prove it every second of the day. And when Aries learns that, they stop being reactive. They stop chasing every fight. They stop needing to be first, best, and fastest. They don't lose their fire. They just direct it with more clarity. They become the warrior who doesn't fight every battle, just the ones that matter. They become the leader who doesn't need to scream to be heard. And that's when their full potential unlocks, because Aries isn't here to dominate. They're here to initiate, to create, to start movements, spark change, inspire courage in those who've forgotten what bravery feels like. And yes, they'll always have that restless edge. They'll always be a little intense, a little impulsive, a little hard to keep up with. But that's the part of their gift, because in a world where most people are waiting to be ready, waiting to be perfect, to be accepted, Aries goes first, and in doing so, they give the rest of us permission to follow, to try, to risk, and to be real. So if you're an Aries Sun and you've been told your whole life that you're too much, too loud, too fast, too reckless, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's that the world wasn't built for your fire. But that doesn't mean you should dim it. It means you have to learn how to hold it, how to wield it, how to burn in a way that lights your path instead of consuming it. Because you weren't born to sit still. You weren't born to play it safe. You were born to blaze a trail where there isn't one, to say what others are too afraid to say, to feel everything fully, even when it hurts, and to remind the rest of us that life is short and courage is everything. That's what really means to be an Aries Sun. Not just the stereotypes, not just the noise, but the fire beneath it all. Now, if you want to explore more about how astrology reveals the deeper layers of personality and behavior, especially in extreme cases, that's what this channel is all about. I create in-depth content on astrological criminal profiling that is looking at how planetary placements show up in the lives and crimes of serial killers. But I also offer something more personal. If you're interested in understanding your own natal chart in a deeply psychological and emotionally precise way, I now offer personalized chart readings. You can find a link in the description box if you're ready to uncover what's written in your own sky. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video.